Hello students. Um, we are again moving towards progress of poesy, and I am repeating the first part because in the earlier video there were some sound problems, and I was getting comments that it's not clear, so I am preparing it once again. The progress of poesy, first part of the poem. And as I have told earlier in the previous video, that because it is a long poem, it is not possible to cover up it in one single lecture, so I'll be trying to cover it in a few parts. So let's begin. Progress of Poesy, a Pindaric ode. Progress. This poem, Progress of Poesy, it was written in fits and starts, not in a smooth way. It was finished in 1755, but printed 3 years later in 1757, along with the poem The Bard. When it was published, it was entitled only Ode, and it was not until 1768 that it received its full title, The Progress of Poesy, a Pindaric Ode. Shortly before its publication in 1757, Horace Walpole had referred to it as an ode on the power and progress of poesy. So, as we can see by the title, it talks about the progress of poetry. In 1757, Gray did not provide any notes to the progress of poesy. Maybe he was perhaps embarrassed by the great popularity of his elegy, and he seems to have decided to puzzle all except the most learned of his readers, as is clear from the brief motto from Pindar's Olympian Odes, which he himself translated as vocal to the intelligent alone. So, as we have read about the life biography of Thomas Gray in previous lecture, it says that he was, of a person who was deprived, and he was not a, very simple character. So he was not a normal person. So maybe he had that complex of getting superiority in his life, and because of that he did not provide any notes, and that only a selected intellectual readers or selected readers or selected intellectuals can understand his poetry, because this is a poem to intelligent people only. So Gray amplified the quotation in 1768, as an early reviewer had recommended. Then later, after a few persuasions, he talked about, gave some notes, provided some notes for the progress of poesy. And there also, he says, when the author first published this and the following ode, he was advised even by his friends to subjoin some few explanatory notes, but he had too much respect for the understanding of his readers to take that liberty, that I don't want to provide notes because I want my readers to take this liberty of understanding the poetry on their own. Okay, so let's begin the poem. The poem, it talks about the progress of poetry, how it started in the Greek era and how it later reached to England and into the form where Gray was surviving. So in the first stanza, he talks about the source of poetry and the kinds of poetry, and he says that poetry, which actually has its source in the fountains of Mount Helicon, that is a Greek place, poetry gives life and lustre to all it touches, and its majestic flow, it enriches every subject, and sometimes every course becomes rapid and irresistible. So when Gray means to say is that the imagination as manifested in poetry transforms the world of ordinary vision. Gray expresses himself by making use of the ancient Greek myth regarding Mount Helicon, which was sacred to muses, and the idea is expressed in very metaphorical language, and it is compared to 1,000 streams flowing onwards from their source, etc. So, the poetry, which is deep and majestic, headlong and impetuous. So, he talks about both kinds of poetry. So, let's begin the text. Uh, Awake, Aeolian lyre, awake. So he is imploring, he explores the Aeolus, who is god of wind, and lyre, Aeolian lyre, is a harp of Aeolus, and that harp which he can wake up and play. Like, so the god of wind, he is exploring, or he wants the god of wind to awake and play his musical harp or musical lyre. Uh, so maybe here he if is may he may mean to refer to lyrical poetry. And here I want to comment that Corliss has also written a poem which is named Aeolian Harp. Okay, so the reference meets here. And wake up my singing lyre, wake up my singing lyre, awake, Eolin lyre, awake, wake up my singing lyre, wake up, and give through rapture all thy trembling strings, and let your throbbing strings produce sounds of delight. So, sounds of delight. So let all your strings, all the strings of Olin lyre, let it produce the throbbing delight, or the trembling strings, throbbing strings, let it produce music uh, from Helicon's harmonious springs, which flows from the harmonious spring, from the poetical fountain of Helicon, Helicon is a mountain which is sacred to Muses, or the goddess of poetry. So he talks about 1,000 rills which take their mazy progress. That mazy progress take 1,000 rills, 1,000 streams, 1,000 brook that are originated from the Helicon, Mount Helicon, and they take their zigzag process, their zigzag journey, and they move forward. So idea here is that Mount Helicon, which is a sacred mountain to all the goddesses of muses, or goddesses of poetry that are known as muses, and the muses, the mountain is sacred to muses. That means all kind of musical poetries or songs are being created there, and 1,000 rills, 1,000 brooks means 1,000 stream of poetry. They take their journey, they forward into their journey, they progress into their journey in a zigzag way. Means not a when we talk about music, it's not something straight. It moves, sometimes it moves with ebbs and flows. And the laughing flower, the laughing flowers that round them blow, the laughing flowers, the happy flowers which bloom around them, they also receive their nourishment and their sweet smells from these brooks as they flow onwards. Drink life and fragrance as they flow. So all the flowers which are actually symbol of happiness, they come in the way of these brooks that round them blow, that are blooming around those brooks, around those streams. They drink life as if they are capturing life and fragrance from these fountains. So the various sources of poetry, they touch all the areas of life, and actually they are a source of happiness for all to whom they meet. Now the rich streams of music winds along, deep, majestic, smooth and strong, through verdant vales and Ceres garden green, now rolling down the steep Amin. So the rich stream of music winds along, the rich stream of music that follows, it winds along, it moves along its course, deep, majestic, smooth and strong. Now these are the various kinds of poetry which are deep, which are majestic, which are smooth, which are strong. Now it will be connecting to the next line, which says, through verdant vales and Ceres garden green. With verdant vales, those fertile valleys, green valleys which are full of fruits, and Ceres garden green, and the gardens of Ceres. Ceres is the goddess of earth or agriculture, and the garden of Ceres, which has been covered with gold, garden of which has been gold covered, garden green. Here this is the reference of the cornfields. So the cornfields which look like as if gold, something golden has been growing on the fields. And so the poetry, it reaches not only to the flowers, the music of poetry which winds along, which moves along its course in the form of the rich streams of Mount Helicon, rich streams or springs which has been flowing from Mount Helicon, means the poetical streams or the poetry. It not only reaches to the flowers which come in between, but it also reaches to the valleys, to the gardens, to the green valleys, and to the garden, to the earth, to the plain areas also. Now rolling down the steep amain. Now rolling down, now moving down, steep amain, fiercely in a steep, in a very, great speed, very fiercely. So the sometimes these streams roll with great force down the mountain slopes. Means sometimes the poetry mood of the poetry is very, very strong. He said deep, majestic, smooth, and strong. So the mood of poetry, which is strong, which has a fierce move, headlong, impetuous, which is headlong, which moves in the movement with the head, and forcefully. It is seen, means the poetry. Idea is that poetic imagination transforms the world of ordinary sights and sounds, and poetry is like a stream, just as a stream sometimes passes through fields and sometimes rolls down mountains. So poetry is sometimes quiet and majestic, and sometimes vehement and tumultuous. So sometimes it's deep, sometimes it's majestic, sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's tumultuous. So see it pour. Look what it pours, what it gives. Okay. So sometimes the streams roll with great force down mountain slopes and may be seen rushing with tremendous vigor and speed in a reckless manner. The rocks and nodding groves rebellow the roar, and all the rocks and the nodding groves, the nodding trees, the moving trees, the waving trees, they rebellow, they echo, or they reply to the roar, to this roar of stream, means this roar of music. So all the rocks, all the trees, all the valleys, as if they are singing along with the sound of the music of the poetry. They are also singing in the same way. So the first stanza, he talks about the source of the poetry. The source of the poetry is Mount Helicon, where Aeolus, or god of the wind, he plays his musical harp. Okay, or we can have the allegorical meaning that is given to the lyrical poetry. So on the Mount Helicon, when the Aeolus plays his musical harp, it produces music and it gives movement to its strings. It creates rupture, it creates happiness, and from that point, Mount Helicon, the harmonious springs, many harmonious springs, thousands of rills, thousands of brooks of poetry. These brooks or these streams are not actually the streams of water. These are the streams of poetry, and whosoever come along in the course of the journey of these musical streams or poetry, they also laugh, they also feel happy, they also flow with the music. So whether they are laughing flowers, that means the poetries which are happy in the mood, they make people happy, and they drink life and fragrance as the flow from the poetry. With the mood of the poetry, they drink life, they, as if they are getting life, as if they are getting fragrance of the life from those musics. And when they move strong, these streams of music, means the musical note or poetry, when it moves along, sometimes it's deep, sometimes it's majestic, sometimes it's smooth, and sometimes it's strong. So the various types of poetry, the various moods of poetry. Here we can say that grey hair is reminding of Horace, the earliest of the poets in Greek, who has been creating these kind of poetries, various kinds of epics. So when these epics or these poetries, they move forward into the green valleys, into the verdant valleys, and into the gardens or plains of Ceres. Ceres, he means goddess of earth. The idea here is he talks about the ripe fields of ripe corn presided over by Ceres, or the goddess of earth. Means everything is beautiful, agriculturally rich also. And when it's ruled down into the great force, and it creates forcefully, okay, it moves down into the mountain slopes. Means when it comes downwards from the mountain slopes and moving towards plain, you just look at the movement of the streams or the streams of poetry, that how rocks, all the rocks and nodding groves, trees are also echoing. Means all the listeners, they are also dancing with the music of poetry, and they are also rebellowing or echoing to the music of poetry. Okay, so this is the first paragraph where he talks about the source of the poetry. In the next paragraph, in the second stanza of first part, he will be talking about the functions of poetry, that how it controls the power. So we'll be discussing it in the next lecture. Thank you. Thank you.